Our mission at the network is to help you become and grow as a follower of Jesus, and then to help you help others become and grow as a follower of Jesus. Actually, that's our mission, and it's pretty simple. It's not about buildings. It's not about some fancy organizational structure. It's about becoming and growing as a follower of Jesus. In fact, Jesus said, I am the way and the truth and the life. He kind of said, I'm the way to God. I'm the way to the Father. I think our culture gets stuck on the first part of that, on the way. So if I believe in Jesus, then that's kind of my ticket to heaven. Now let me just be clear that the birth and the death and the resurrection of Jesus is vitally important for relating to God and for being a part of God's family. But I think we've reduced all of this to simply believing in Jesus, and then that's the ticket to heaven. And I think it's a lot more than that. Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. It's really about a way of life. It's the Jesus life. It's following Jesus. It's kind of interesting when you track with Jesus in the Bible. Right early on, he runs into two guys who are fishing, and he just says two very simple words to them. He says, follow me. That's about as clear as it is. And then you keep tracking with Jesus through this. There's another place he has this interaction, this dialogue going on with this young guy who's very rich and has a position of leadership. And they're going back and forth about which is the right commandment to love and serve God. And Jesus kind of sums it up by saying to this young guy who's rich and has leadership, I tell you what, sell everything you have, give it to the poor, and then come follow me. So there are those words again, follow me. Another time Jesus is talking to his 12 disciples. You kind of find that at different places, but one is in Luke 9. And he says to them, whoever wants to be my disciple, that individual basically needs to follow me. So following Jesus suggests that we live the Jesus life, that somehow between the bookend of his birth and of his death, we look at Jesus' life and we live that life. So what Jesus did, we did. Who Jesus cared about, we care about. What really mattered to Jesus really matters to us. For about a month, this is a year or so ago, I decided to focus for an entire 30 days on the life of Jesus. So I read through what we call the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and I just simply looked at Jesus and I read about Jesus and how he interacted with people, actually who he interacted with, and what the nature of his interaction was like. When he was with religious crowd, what was he like? When he was with the non-religious crowd, what was he like? What did he say and what did he do when he was with people who were beaten up and broken and kind of despised? And what did Jesus say and what did Jesus do when he was with people who had all the religious rules nailed down, but their hearts were kind of shriveled up when it came to extending God's love to other people? In fact, you know what Jesus called them? He said they were whitewashed tombs, which is kind of like saying they had their church clothes on, but they really stunk inside. And then before Jesus went back to heaven, it's recorded in Matthew 28, he looked at his disciples and he said, now go and make followers of me all across the world. And as you're going and you're doing this, here's what you need to do. You need to teach them to obey everything that I've done and everything that I've said. In other words, what it really means to be my follower is to follow me. So what's that look like 2,000 years later? Does it mean that when people look at us, they're supposed to see us in robes with sandals and we're kind of mimic what Jesus is like? Or does it mean when we go about living our lives, in 2012, that actually people look at us and they say, you know what? This person looks a whole lot like Jesus looks. So if we followed Jesus for 3 years, and Jesus did ministry for about 3 years, what would have been like? What would we have experienced? Well, very early on in his ministry, it says that Jesus was in the synagogue one day. So he, as he often did on the Sabbath, he was in the synagogue, and he stands up to read, and he takes the scrolls, because they didn't have books. He takes the scrolls, and he opens it up to Isaiah, and what we now call the Old Testament. And here's what Jesus read. Here are the words that he read. "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he's anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to release the oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." That's what he read. Then it says he stopped reading, he closed the scroll, and he looked at everybody who was there, and he said, actually, those words are taking place now. You know, he kind of essentially said, that's referring to me. And so in many respects, this is Jesus' manifesto, right at the beginning of his ministry. And then you track him for 3 years. And Jesus had incredible compassion on people the religious leaders wanted to kind of chuck away and throw away and despise. He found himself with people who had made incredibly bad choices, and what Jesus did was kind of extend love and grace to them. His sharpest words, I mean the harshest words of Jesus, are to the religious crowd, who again thought they had all of their stuff together, and Jesus criticized them because they didn't have heart and compassion for people in need. The amazing thing is, if you look at Jesus through those 3 years, he took time to party. But again, interesting thing is, most of his partying is with people outside of the religious system, not with people inside who just got way too serious. And then Jesus took time to look into the faces of kids when other people would kind of come around and say, "Get the kids away, you're bugging Jesus." Jesus would kind of say, "No, bring the kids to me." And then he'd look at the people around him and he'd say, "You know what? Your faith needs to be simple like kids. Stop making it so complex and so sophisticated." And then you keep tracking with Jesus, and you go a little further, and he would build bridges to people who were what I would kind of call wealthy rip-off artists. And then he would kind of show them a new way of living. And then it got to the end of Jesus' life. And rather than defend his rights, he willingly and courageously gave his life for humanity. So in following Jesus for all those 3 years and all the things that he did and all the places he went and all the people he cared for, he then had the audacity to say, "And if you live like this, you'll experience the kind of life that you only could have dreamed of before." Oh, it's amazing. It's really incredible to follow Jesus. In ancient Rome, they would have these fights in the Colosseum, and you've seen it if you've seen the movie The Gladiator. And so you have these guys doing fights, and then one guy would have a sword over another, and they'd look up at Caesar, and Caesar would either do thumbs up, which means spare the guy's life, or thumbs down, which means take his life. And so kind of in that spirit, as we track with Jesus, as we kind of unwrap, what's it mean to follow Jesus? Let me suggest some things. I think if we followed him, Jesus would say thumbs up on this and thumbs down on that. So let me offer some. Here's one. I think Jesus would say thumbs up on compassion and thumbs down on a judgmental attitude. I really believe that followers of Jesus should be leaders of the world in the compassion game. Should kind of really model what it means to care for the poor, model what it means to reach out to disenfranchised, model what it means to love and care for people who are on the fringes or who are even outside. Less interested in pointing fingers at people and saying shame on them, far more interested in kind of rolling up our sleeves, getting our hands and our fingers and our elbows dirty in addressing the needs of people around us. So thumbs up on compassion, I think Jesus would say. Another thing he'd say as you kind of track with him through that is thumbs up on adventuresome spirit and thumbs down on playing it safe. Really, which means stepping out of our comfort zones, attempting things we've never attempted before for the sake of reaching people, taking risks. It really means stepping out in faith more than kind of trying to hold on to what we have and protect ourselves. And so we'll put money and we'll put time and we'll put energy on the line for addressing the real needs that we see around us. And again, the amazing thing about Jesus, he says, that you might at first glance say, well, that's going to lead to a really dull life. Jesus says, you know what, if you do that, if you have this adventuresome spirit, you'll experience life like you've never done before. Then you kind of keep tracking with Jesus, and here's another one I think we'd see, and that is thumbs up with a focus on bridges, and thumbs down with a focus on buildings. You say, well, does that mean you're like the anti-building guy, Craig, that the network really doesn't want anything to do with buildings? Well, we too kind of say some things about building campaigns, but no, we're not anti-building. In fact, as you're watching this, you're in a building. But I think here's the deal. When we get to heaven, I don't think Jesus is going to look at us and say, hey, great building. I love that facility, like the escalators, like the elevators, like that stage. I don't think Jesus will give a rip about that. What he's really interested in is, how did we do at building bridges? How do we do at building bridges into our communities? How did we do at building bridges between individuals and Jesus? How did we do at building bridges to the disenfranchised in our communities? I really think Jesus would go thumbs up on bridges and not so much with a focus on buildings. Then you keep tracking with Jesus. Let me kind of serve up one more, and that is thumbs up on imagination and creativity, and thumbs down on being stuck in a rut. There's a place in the New Testament where it says, God is able to do far more than we could ever ask or imagine. Means God kind of wants us to imagine how we could use our gifts and abilities and our talents to really extend his love to the community. Sometimes when we think of the church, we kind of visualize this army. You've probably seen it, army all kind of marching in parade, all in lockstep. You don't want anybody to imagine. You want them to do exactly what they're told. And sometimes we may feel the church is like that. I think, no, God says, you know what? I want you to imagine. I want you to imagine how you could use everything that I've placed in your hands to make a difference in loving and serving people. So thumbs up with imagination and creativity. Jesus simply said, follow me, because I am the way and I'm the truth and I'm the life.